So I define vocation as our capacity to respond to the call of God with our full identity so that we are living our lives participating in what God is doing in the world. So one of the ways that we talk about this is we ask people to think about a question to discern that, because it is a process of ongoing discernment. While our discipleship of Jesus Christ is a constant, our way in which that gets worked out, specifically in our response to God's Spirit at different times in our lives, in different settings, can be different. So we often ask the question, at this time in your spiritual journey, how do you envision your call to God's mission in the world? And so vocation is our ability to respond to the nudges and the call of the Spirit faithfully in response to God's mission in the world. Some of us are really shaped by the fact that in public school education, especially in the late 20th century, vocation was really about way of saying you're not going to college. You have like vocational arts. Like vocation was about jobs or your work. And if you went to college, then you had to figure out what your vocation was after college. So we confuse this for many of us by thinking of it as job hunting, when really the notion of vocation that comes right out of the scriptures is really this deeper understanding of your whole life responding to God's voice, God's Spirit, right? So vocare is about listening to the voice or the call of God. Calling and vocation are interchangeable. And really what we're asking ourselves are deeper questions about our identity, the way in which we function in the world, the way in which we spend our time and our lives and our talents and our strengths. And some of that is certainly about our work. But some of that is about much more than our work. Part of my vocation is that I'm a married man with adult children, and part of my calling is to be a good parent and a good husband, is to be a parent to adults now, which is different than when I had parents of young kids. Like part of my calling shifts depending upon your different social location, your different context, the different challenges you face. And so it's much bigger than just work or finding your job, even though my work is certainly part of my vocation. For many of us, spiritual formation is built around spiritual practices. And the spiritual practices that I needed when I was a teenager who said yes to Jesus in a personal way, some of them remain. I still read the scriptures. I still pray. I still am deeply involved in church. But some of them are profoundly different. I was a teenager when I said yes to Jesus. Now I'm a middle-aged man. And so part of my formation has to change as my identity changes, as my life changes, as I grow and mature and the different things I face and are challenged change. And that means my vocation, my capacity to hear God's voice leading me to respond with all that I am to what God's doing in the world will change. And so for me, vocation isn't about finding some magical path. It's about continually being formed to hear God's voice in whatever context I'm in, whatever challenge I'm in, whatever stage of life I'm in, and saying yes obediently to that call in a way that allows me to participate in what God is doing in the world. The difference is that different seasons of life require different spiritual practices for me to hear that call. The most basic way to think about the call of God is the call of God to follow Jesus, to believe that Jesus is indeed the true King of the world, to believe that Jesus' work is bringing justice and healing to the world. I would say it's to be the answer to the prayer, your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. The specific calling is about the specific places in earth. Like my calling very specifically as a pastor for 27 years was part of my discipleship, my general calling. But it showed up with really different ways than becoming a seminary administrator, seminary professor, a consultant, a coach, a speaker, a writer. So in different seasons of life and with different assignments, if you will, there's a more specific nature to the general call, which is to be a follower and disciple of Jesus Christ.